The lantern light is dim, and the air around you feels sticky with tar, brine, and smoke. You stand on the deck of an 18th century ship, the kind that looks glorious in paintings and smells considerably less so in real life. The sea tonight is unusually calm, almost suspiciously polite, like a neighbor who is definitely about to ask to borrow money. The sails sag gently in the breeze, and the wood beneath your boots hums with the rhythm of waves lapping against the hull. A gentle warning before we set off: you probably won't make it through this day. Not because of mutiny or storms or tragic maritime drama, but because sleep has a stronger pull than history does. That's the point of this voyage: to wander slowly, without urgency, until your thoughts dissolve into the night. If you find yourself enjoying this quiet unraveling of time, you could softly press that like button. It's gentler than tying a reef knot, I promise. And if you want more voyages like this, subscribe. It helps this little crew keep sailing. One more request: leave a comment with your location and your local time. It's strangely comforting to imagine us all drifting together across continents and oceans, each in our own night. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. It is about 1750. You're among sailors who have already been at sea for weeks, maybe months. Their days blur together in an endless carousel of hauling ropes, patching sails, scrubbing decks, and waiting for something interesting to happen. Supper is being served, though served might be generous. On the mess table, salted beef that doubles as exercise equipment, watery ale, and the famous ship's biscuit. The biscuit: square, hard, immortal. A baked good that is neither bread nor cracker, but something entirely its own. More weapon than food, more fossil than pastry. When you knock on it with your knuckles, it makes the sound of a door you don't want to open. And here is tonight's major fact: sailors often used these biscuits as notebooks. Yes, when paper was scarce, when boredom was crushing, when time needed marking, men scratched names, drawings, and tiny letters into them. Some of those biscuits, against all odds, survive today in museum collections. They carry graffiti from a century and a half ago, still readable, still oddly human. The obscure tidbit: sailors sometimes saved decorated biscuits as gifts for loved ones, a birthday token perhaps, inscribed with initials, a "thinking of you," that could also double as a blunt object. More than one biscuit ended up tucked in a drawer for decades, treasured long after the voyage. Historians still debate whether these carvings were acts of love, acts of boredom, or simply a way to pass time while your teeth healed from chewing. Possibly all three. The deck rocks beneath you as a rat scurries across your path, its little claws tapping a rhythm faster than the sailors themselves. You lean back against a barrel, biscuit in hand. The ocean hums with its long sigh, and you close your eyes. You realize that history is sometimes written not in books or monuments, but in flour, baked 4 times until it becomes memory itself. The morning arrives reluctantly, as though the sun has considered staying in bed. You wake to the pale glow of light through canvas sails. Around you, the crew stirs in various moods, ranging from grumpy to slightly grumpier. Tin mugs clink against the deck, and the smell of weak ale wafts up. Today's breakfast beverage, though calling it refreshing would be a stretch. And there it is again, the ship's biscuit. Yesterday's biscuit. Tomorrow's biscuit. Today's breakfast. A sailor hands you one, and you quickly learn not to bite it directly unless you enjoy visiting the ship's carpenter for emergency dental work. You dunk it in ale until it softens, which takes roughly the same time as learning Latin. While you chew, another sailor shows you his calendar biscuit. Into the surface, he has scratched a series of lines, one for each day he thinks has passed. He shrugs, muttering that it might be Monday, though he's equally convinced it could be Thursday. Or both. Time on board is less a calendar than a soup, and the biscuit becomes his way of pretending it's measurable. Here's the historical fact for this stretch of sea. Ship's biscuits were baked not once, not twice, but sometimes 4 times over in large ovens until all moisture was gone. That's why they survived years in barrels, often outlasting the voyage and the people who sailed it. Archaeologists have found biscuits intact in shipwrecks centuries old. Technically edible, practically regrettable. The odd tidbit? In France, certain biscuits de mer were occasionally flavored with caraway seeds. Imagine that, the faintest hint of spice breaking through monotony. It was like the 18th century equivalent of someone bringing cookies to the office, a festive rarity, remembered mostly because of how unusual it was. Historians still debate whether such flavorings ever made it onto long ocean voyages, or whether they were confined to shorter trips near coasts. After all, a barrel of caraway biscuits would probably feel like a luxurious joke halfway across the Atlantic. The day passes in rhythm, ropes hauled, sails adjusted, decks scrubbed until they gleam. Overhead, gulls scream like unpaid interns. One swoops down and steals a sailor's cap, providing a full afternoon of laughter. On a ship, even a gull's bad manners count as quality entertainment. During the midday meal, you notice another biscuit in the hands of a shipmate. Upon its surface is carved a tiny ship, sails proud, better kept than the one you're standing on. He smirks, better to dream of this one. You agree. Biscuit ships don't leak. Biscuit ships don't stink. Biscuit ships don't shout orders at you before dawn. Later, as you coil rope, you overhear talk of sending biscuits home as love tokens. One man swears he'll inscribe his sweetheart's name and send it across the sea. The others tease him, reminding him that by the time it arrives, she'll be married to someone who works in a bakery. He laughs, but later you see him quietly carving anyway. Hope, apparently, is as stubborn as flour. The evening brings golden light across the sails. You lean against a coil of rope, biscuit in hand, scratching a doodle of your own, a crude sun with rays that look suspiciously like noodles. It won't last forever, but it doesn't need to. The sea rocks you, and for a moment you feel like part of the long, slow conversation between sailors and their strange, indestructible bread. Night falls again, cool and steady. The sky stretches vast, black, and littered with stars. You lie on the deck, staring upward, the biscuit tucked like a small stone in your pocket. Around you, the crew murmurs, some telling stories, others humming half-remembered tunes. The sea carries every sound softly away, as though it is half asleep itself. The watch begins. Men take turns keeping eyes on the horizon, though there's little to see except the occasional flicker of starlight on the waves. You join them briefly, gazing out at nothing, feeling time slide like syrup. A sailor beside you passes his biscuit notebook around. On it, he has scratched a short rhyme, doggerel, verse, clumsy but sincere. Everyone chuckles, not at the words themselves, but at the fact that the biscuit is now both snack and sonnet. Here is the fact of the hour. Biscuits often attracted weevils. Yes, the tiny beetles would hatch inside, leaving pinholes, and a faint crunch that was not flour. Sailors were instructed to tap the biscuits on the table to knock the insects out before eating. Sometimes they shook them over tea, letting the extra protein fall in. Delicious? Not exactly. Unavoidable? Entirely. Historians still debate whether sailors truly minded the weevils, or whether they shrugged and accepted them as spice. Diaries contradict one another. Some complain bitterly, others barely mention it. Maybe hunger dulls both appetite and outrage. The ship rocks gently, And you imagine all the biscuits aboard, barrels upon barrels stacked in the hold, a silent cargo of pale square memories waiting to be chewed, carved, cursed, or saved. Somewhere down there, in the dark belly of the ship, lies the future museum exhibit, a biscuit that will survive storms, time, and neglect, only to sit centuries later under glass while school children giggle at its absurdity. You walk across the deck, pausing to rest your hand on the rail. The salt air is cool against your face, and the stars above seem almost close enough to pluck like fruit. You hear a sailor nearby humming a lullaby meant for his child, his voice low, tired, but oddly tender. You picture him carving that lullaby into a biscuit tomorrow, carrying her memory in the only material available.
The street is quiet, though not silent. A thin fog hangs over the rooftops, and from somewhere nearby, the deep hum of a bread oven sighs through the air. You walk slowly, because this is not the kind of place you rush through. The ground is uneven, cobblestones glistening faintly with morning dew, and your shoes crunch softly as you move. On either side, the houses lean in close together, as if whispering secrets. And then you smell it. Bread. Heavy, yeasty, comforting. The kind of smell that convinces you that history, for all its dust and wars, wasn't such a bad place to live. Bakers are already awake, their arms coated in flour, their faces red from the heat of ovens. They shape dough in long, steady motions, the rhythm hypnotic, almost like a lullaby for your eyes. Here's the first fact worth keeping in mind. Medieval bakers often measured time not with hourglasses or bells, but with the very bread they baked. The crusts, as they browned and split, became an informal clock. If a loaf took this long to crack, then the prayers must end. If it darkened this much, then the oven was ready for the next round. A watch you could eat, though not recommended if you were still timing the stew. You probably won't make it through this day. The combination of oven heat, steady motions, and endless bread scent has a way of lulling even the most alert traveler into sleep. Still, before we need too far, a gentle invitation. If you like these slow strolls through the dull but oddly cozy corners of history, tap like. Subscribe for more if you'd like to keep walking down quiet streets like this one. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? I always imagine half of you drifting off at midnight, while someone else is sneak listening at 3 p.m. in the office. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You pass the wide doorway of a bakery. The glow of the oven spills out like sunrise, golden and thick, dust motes swimming in the air. On a wooden table, loaves are lined up, not for eating yet, but for observing. Their crusts speak a language of their own. One crack means 10 minutes. Another shade of brown means 20. A crust split perfectly down the middle, that's when the monks down the street know to shuffle out of their pews and collect their bread rations. The odd tidbit here, in some towns, the ovens weren't private at all. They were communal, shared by the whole neighborhood. Families kneaded dough at home and carried it down to the baker, who controlled the oven for everyone, which meant you not only knew your neighbor's gossip, you also knew if their bread turned out flat again. Historians still debate whether crust timing was an everyday technique or something passed on mostly in monasteries and apprentice kitchens. But for you, standing in the flower haze of this medieval morning, the debate doesn't matter. You just watch the bakers tap loaves, nodding in sleepy approval, as though each crust were quietly ticking off the hours. The day brightens slowly. Sunlight slips between slanted roofs, painting golden stripes across the stone. The town stirs awake. Merchants shuffle out, children chase hoops, a rooster insists it's later than it really is. But here, by the ovens, time is still measured in bread. A boy lugs a basket down the street, loaves piled so high he can barely see over them. He stumbles, drops one, and before he can scoop it back, a dog darts in and runs off triumphantly with the prize. The baker sighs, but shrugs. Life happens. Somewhere, someone jokes that the dog will return in exactly 20 minutes, just when the crust has cooled enough not to burn its teeth. Here's the fact for this part of the day. Bread wasn't just food, it was also law. Medieval authorities regulated its size, its price, and even its ingredients. A loaf that was too light could get a baker fined, or worse. Bread anchored society, and society didn't take anchoring lightly. Every bite was part of the legal system. The odd tidbit. Bakers often tested oven heat with whatever was at hand, scraps of straw, bits of parchment, or, if they were feeling especially bold, their own bare arms thrust into the oven mouth. A brief moment of pain told them all they needed. A crude thermometer, yes, but surprisingly effective. You glance at one baker rubbing his singed arm with a grimace that says, "Worth it, probably." Historians still debate whether bakers truly relied on crust as their mean time clock, or whether they used instinct built from years of kneading and watching. Perhaps the crust was more of a teaching trick for apprentices who needed something concrete. Perhaps the masters trusted their noses more than their eyes. You walk past the same bakery from earlier. The men look a little slower now, leaning on their paddles like farmers resting on pitchforks. The heat is endless, the rhythm monotonous, but there's comfort in the repetition. Bread rises, crust cracks, bread cools. Time passes, measured not in numbers, but in flavors. Nearby, children laugh at a loaf shaped oddly crooked. They call it the cursed bread and run in circles with giddy energy. The baker waves his hand dismissively and says, "Cursed bread still fills a stomach." A line so practical it could be engraved on every medieval wall. You keep walking, and the street hums around you. The smell of baking clings to your clothes, warm and steady. You think, maybe there's no better way to measure a day than with bread. Clocks tick, bells toll, but bread softens the hours until they taste almost sweet. Evening folds itself gently over the town. The ovens glow again, brighter now that the sky has dimmed. The cobblestones hold on to the day's heat, radiating it back in soft waves that make the air shimmer. You walk slower because everything around you has slowed down. The major fact for this stretch of the story: monasteries often used bread as a silent signal. In places where conversation was forbidden, the crack of crust became a subtle timekeeper. When loaves split just so, monks knew it was time to change prayers or to file silently into the refectory. Imagine an entire order guided not by bells, but by the sound of bread breaking. A holy clock, crunchy and sacred. The odd tidbit: some medieval people believed that bread carried personality. The first loaf out of the oven might be shared with neighbors for luck. The last loaf, sometimes, was avoided. It was thought to be moody, perhaps unlucky. Superstition slipped into daily chores the way flour slipped into every crease of a baker's tunic. Historians still debate whether bread as timekeeper was more symbolic than practical. Perhaps the crust method was exaggerated later, a quaint story about simpler times. Or perhaps it was real, and every cracked loaf was genuinely a medieval stopwatch. The records don't tell us for sure, though the crumbs of evidence linger. You return once more to the bakery doorway. Remember those loaves from the first night, lined up like sleepy soldiers? New ones rest there now, their crusts splitting with soft sighs. The bakers lean back, arms crossed, watching as if the bread will announce the hour. Cats curl nearby, tails flicking lazily, while children dart in and out, snagging crumbs when no one's looking. A baker chuckles as he hands over a loaf to a customer. He says, "This one tells me it's exactly supper time." Deadpan. The customer laughs, though both of them know the bread is too hot to eat yet. Still, the illusion of a bread clock is too charming to resist. You wander to the edge of town. The fields stretch out, quiet and golden, the last light of day fading across their stalks. Behind you, the ovens glow faintly, their smoke drifting upward like the last exhale of a long day. The smell lingers in your hair, in your hands, in the very air you breathe. And as you stand there, you realize something. Bread isn't just food or time or law, it's rhythm. Rise and fall, warmth and cool, crack and crumble.
The kind of rhythm that makes life bearable, predictable, even comforting. The stars begin to appear, faint but steady. The town settles into silence, ovens finally dimming, streets emptying. You feel your steps slow further, your body loosen. The day has been measured not in bells or numbers, but in crusts, and now as the night folds over you, you let yourself drift with it. Soft, warm, and steady, like bread cooling on the table.
The night begins with a hush. A low breeze wanders lazily off the Nile, slipping between mud brick houses, tugging at reed mats and carrying with it the faint perfume of sesame oil and lentils simmering on the fire. You're standing in a narrow street, the kind where shadows pool in corners and lamps glow like tired stars. You walk slowly, your sandals crunching against dust that has been walked upon for thousands of years. This is Egypt. The Egypt of jars and scribes, where even the tiniest detail of daily life is recorded, measured, and, of course, taxed. You feel it already, the soft weight of bureaucracy pressing down like a heavy linen blanket. And tonight we are following the most unexpected treasure of them all. Cooking oil. A substance so ordinary, so slippery, that it held more weight in the kingdom than gold itself. You might think gold. Surely gold was the obsession of the pharaohs. Gold shone in temples, glistened on statues, and dripped from royal coffins. But in your kitchen, yes, you, standing in this little street, it was useless. You couldn't fry your fish in gold. You couldn't light a lamp with it. And so the state smiled politely, held out its hand, and said, "Oil will cost you more than gold." In fact, here's the major fact. The Egyptian government ran an oil monopoly. Oil was pressed in state-controlled workshops, sealed in jars, and sold back to households at inflated prices. And if you dared to make your own, illegal. The jars themselves were state-issued and sometimes reused, scraped clean and resealed with a fresh mark. Recycling, yes, but also a subtle way of saying everything you have, technically, is ours. Your neighbor mutters while pouring a drop of oil into her pan. It sizzles faintly, not enough to coat the bread she wants to fry. She looks across the street at another household where the lamp burns bright. Too bright. Suspiciously bright. Perhaps someone is cheating the system. You smile faintly because even in the quiet of antiquity, envy over the neighbor's lamp is timeless. And yes, you probably won't make it through this day. Your eyes are heavy already. Still, before we wander deeper into this slow story, I'll gently ask, if you enjoy these sleepy rambles through history, please like the video, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know the place and the hour, whether it's dawn in Manila or midnight in Ohio. Now, let's ease further in. You take a deep breath. The air smells of frying onions, hot stone, and river silt. Cats wander casually between your feet, their tails brushing your legs. They pause to lick a paw, then, curiously, dip a tail into an open oil jar as if grooming themselves with luxury lotion. It's oddly elegant, though slightly ridiculous in the grumble of donkeys. You step outside to find the sun already working hard, pressing heat into every surface. The Nile glitters wide and lazy, its water thick with reeds where fishermen wait patiently, nets slack in their hands. Children chase hoops down the same dust-worn paths you walked last night, and the whole village hums with its routines. But even now, at the start of a new day, the thought presses in. Do you have enough oil to last until evening? Here's today's lesson in boredom. Oil wasn't just for cooking. It was for lamps, for rituals, for grooming, even for medicine. Without it, nights were darker, meals duller, temples less fragrant. So when the state monopolized it, everyone felt the pinch. Imagine if toothpaste were sold only by your government in approved tubes at inflated prices, and if you squeezed too much at once, someone might accuse you of smuggling. That's the mood here.
The scribes sit outside the granary, cross-legged with papyrus sheets spread across their knees.
The beginning is slow, on purpose. Imagine the camera gliding across fields of gold and green, where the morning haze lingers longer than it needs to, reluctant to rise. You hear birds trading their usual gossip, a soft bell from somewhere in the distance, and the steady shuffle of bare feet against a dirt road. You're here, in an ancient Indian village, and already the pace is daring you to slow down. The homes around you are simple, made of clay walls smoothed by hand, straw roofs that sigh when the wind passes, and doorways just slightly crooked. Nothing here is symmetrical, and somehow, that's reassuring. A goat bleats loudly at the wrong time, as if auditioning for attention. Spoiler, it doesn't get the role. Inside one of the larger homes, the physician is at work. In India, such healers were called Vaidyas. He doesn't wear a lab coat. His uniform is more sandalwood-scented cloth and streaks of turmeric on his hands. Palm leaf manuscripts are stacked carefully nearby, each line carved with neat precision. Within them lies the Charaka Samhita, one of the great texts of Ayurveda, written around the first millennium BCE. It explains diet, herbs, and most surprisingly, joy. Yes, joy. It suggests laughter as part of treatment, something that modern medicine has only recently circled back to. A patient enters complaining of stomach pain. The physician listens, nods, then quips, "It will pass," in one direction or another. The room erupts in chuckles, and the man laughs despite himself. You realize the joke is not an aside, it's the therapy. Here, medicine is not just ground roots and boiled concoctions, it's the ability to take someone's burden and make it feel lighter, if only for the span of a laugh. Scholars still debate whether laughter therapy was literally prescribed in the same way herbs were, or whether it was more a cultural truth folded into the daily rhythm of healing. But here, in this courtyard, the difference hardly matters. And if you're listening along, half dozing perhaps, allow me a small kindness. If you enjoy this gentle walk through history, consider liking and subscribing. It helps this sleepy village survive in the modern jungle of algorithms. And if you have a moment before you drift away, write in the comments where you are and what time it is there. I promise someone across the world will smile reading it. The day stretches lazily forward. Children race barefoot past you, someone stirs a pot of lentils, and a parent repeats a secret it was never supposed to overhear. Life here insists on being unhurried, and so, softly, let's move further into the journey. You leave the physician's doorway and follow him beneath a sprawling banyan tree, whose roots spill like 100 wandering feet. This is the village's open-air hospital, playground, and philosophy club all at once. Beneath its branches, women grind spices rhythmically, men share riddles, and children tangle in games of chase. Laughter hangs in the air not as an event, but as background music. The healer sets down a brass bowl of herbs and motions for you to sit. A patient recovering from fever is already there, sipping a thin broth. Instead of solemn silence, the physician calls for storytellers. They arrive with painted drums, weaving tales of talking animals and foolish kings. The patient chuckles weakly at first, then stronger, until his shoulders shake and his eyes brighten. No copay, no side effects, except perhaps a sore belly from laughing. Fact slips in here. Ancient Indian medical theory held that emotions directly influenced health. A cheerful spirit was believed to aid digestion and circulation. Sadness, on the other hand, weighed down the inner fires. In modern terms, they were talking about stress before stress had a name. Near the banyan's roots, you spot small clay monkey figurines. They're not toys, but charms, left behind as playful offerings to mischievous spirits. The idea, if the gods laugh, perhaps they'll spare you misfortune. It's an obscure little cultural tidbit, but it makes sense in a world where laughter itself is sacred. Scholars still argue whether laughter therapy was systematically prescribed or simply observed as common wisdom. Did doctors write it down because it healed, or because it was already habit? No one is sure. What is certain is this. Here, healing is communal.
The physician is not a solitary authority. He's more like a conductor of a symphony, where jokes, stories, herbs, and soups all play their part. You sip spiced water, flavored with cumin and fennel. The taste is earthy, cooling, and oddly comforting, as if the village itself is reminding you to unclench your jaw. Around you, the air feels lighter. Shoulders drop. Voices soften. You wonder whether you too are being healed, not with medicine, but with belonging. And then, of course, someone tells a joke about a lazy donkey trying to be a philosopher. The group laughs. You laugh. The patient laughs. Somewhere in the back, the parrot squawks again, repeating the punchline out of context. It doesn't matter. Everything here works together. The herbs, the stories, and the sound of shared joy. The sun slides lower, warming the earth with its last golden light. You walk again, this time down a narrow street where smoke from cooking fires coils upward in lazy spirals. Evening in the village has a softness that no clock could measure. Time here is more like water, pooled, rippling, unhurried. You pass by a household where a woman hums while mixing dough. Her song is not a performance, but a habit, like breathing. She sings of rivers, of elephants, of mischievous lovers. You can't help but notice that every verse carries a playful twist, a little joke tucked in as if even bread making requires laughter to rise properly.